There's a sound our ancestors knew intimately. A whisper on the wind, a rustle in the tall grass just beyond the firelight. It's the sound of being watched. This sensation, a cold prickling at the base of the neck, is more than just a fleeting nerve. It is an echo from a time when darkness was absolute and the night was owned by predators. Our brains evolved in that crucible of fear, learning to decipher every snapped twig, every distant howl. It is an ancient, deeply coded instinct for survival, a hypervigilance that has never truly left us. It lingers in our stories, in our folklore, in the universal fear of what lies unseen. And sometimes that echo grows loud enough to shatter the present. 20 years ago, in a suburb so quiet you could hear the sprinklers turn on from a block away, that echo became a scream. Police were called to a pristine 2-story home. Inside, they found a man, lifeless. His wife sat in the kitchen, her hands steady, her eyes vacant. Her explanation was simple, delivered without a tremor. She told them there was someone else in the house that night. She claimed she heard it. Beneath their bed, a third person, she insisted, breathing in the dark. No one else was ever found. The case was closed, filed away as a tragic domestic breakdown. But the story lingered, becoming a piece of local lore, a chilling whisper about the woman who heard a monster and became one herself. A story that was, for 20 years, just a story, until tonight. The night shift is its own country, a parallel world that exists between dusk and dawn. For Lena, a nurse at St. Jude's Memorial, it was a familiar landscape of sterile, humming silence and hallways lit by the unforgiving glare of fluorescent tubes. In their world, the ordinary rules of time and perception bend. The daytime hustle fades into a quiet so profound that every distant cough, every squeak of a cart's wheel becomes an event. Your senses sharpen. You become attuned to the subtle rhythms of the sleeping and the sick, a guardian in a world of shadows. But tonight, the familiar quiet felt different. It felt heavy, watchful. Lena moved through her rounds, the soft soles of her shoes, the only sound in the long, empty corridor of the 3rd floor. Most of her patients were asleep, their breathing a collection of soft, rhythmic sighs, all but one. Emma, in room 3B. An elderly woman, frail and lost in the fog of a failing mind. Lena entered the room, her penlight cutting a gentle arc through the gloom. Emma was awake, her eyes wide and fixed on the space beneath her bed. And then Lena heard it, a soft, rhythmic current of air, in and out, in and out. It was unmistakable. It was the sound of breathing. Not Emma's, which was shallow and reedy. Not her own. This was deeper, slower. It seemed to come from the floor, from the darkness pooled beneath the steel-framed hospital bed. Lena's training, her rational mind, kicked in immediately. Old buildings make strange noises. The ventilation system, perhaps. Rats. It had to be rats. She offered a reassuring smile to Emma, a gesture more for herself than for the terrified woman in the bed. "It's just the pipes settling, Emma," she said, her voice a calm ripple in the tense silence. Or maybe a mouse in the walls. Nothing to worry about. But the sound didn't stop. It continued its slow, deliberate cadence, a living presence in the room. Emma began to tremble, a low whimper escaping her lips. She leaned closer to Lena, her voice a ragged whisper, so faint it was nearly lost in the sound from below. "It's not the pipes," she rasped, her eyes never leaving the floor. It's whispering my name." A cold dread, sharp and immediate, pierced through Lena's professional calm. She strained to listen, filtering out the hum of the machines, the distant hospital noises, and the steady, unnerving breathing. And for a fleeting second, she thought she heard it too. A sibilant hiss woven into the exhalation, a sound that almost formed a word. Emma. The lights above them flickered once, twice, casting the room in a strobe of light and shadow. The familiar shapes of furniture warped and elongated, turning into grotesque, menacing figures. The shadow under the bed seemed to grow, to deepen, to become a solid patch of absolute black. This was not right. This was not a shift work hallucination, not a trick of a tired mind. This was real. Lena backed out of the room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed to check the records, to see Emma's history, to find a rational explanation for this sudden, terrifying psychosis. She hurried to the nurse's station, the echoing hallway suddenly feeling like a mile-long tunnel. Her fingers trembled as she typed Emma's name into the terminal. The file appeared on the screen. Emma Thorne, room 3B, and next to it, a single, impossible entry. Status, deceased. Time of death, 4:15 p.m., yesterday. The world tilted. The air in Lena's lungs turned to ice. She stared at the screen, the words blurring, refuses to make sense. Emma was dead. The woman in that room, the woman who had just spoken to her, was dead. The body should be in the morgue. Lena's mind reeled, grasping for an explanation. A clerical error. It had to be. A terrible, cruel mistake. But the attending physician's signature was there, time-stamped and verified. It was no mistake. Armed with this terrifying knowledge, Lena felt an unseen force pulling her back toward room 3B. She had to see. She had to understand. She pushed the door open, her hand shaking so badly she could barely grip the handle. The room was colder now, the air thick and still. The breathing was louder, more guttural, and it was joined by a new sound, a dry, scraping noise, the sound of something sharp and hard being dragged across the linoleum floor. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was slow, deliberate, and it was coming from under the bed. The sound drilled into Lena's skull, bypassing reason and striking directly at the ancient primal part of her brain that knew only one thing: predator. This was the sound that our ancestors heard from outside their caves, the sound that signaled a threat that was patient and close. Panic, raw and absolute, finally broke through her training. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers slipping on the screen. She dialed security, her voice a choked, desperate plea. "Help me," she whispered into the phone, her eyes locked on the space beneath the bed. "Room 3B, there's something in here. It's pulling her. Oh God, it's pulling her." As she spoke, she saw it. The edge of the white hospital blanket, which had been neatly tucked in, was now being slowly, inexorably drawn downward into the darkness under the bed. Time seemed to shatter. In the space of a heartbeat, a form began to emerge from the shadows. It was not a man, not an animal. It was a knot of darkness given shape, a tangle of something that looked like wet black limbs, glistening in the dim light. It uncoiled with an unnatural fluidity, rising from the floor and wrapping itself around the figure in the bed. The thing that looked like Emma didn't struggle. It lay still, its eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Lena's fear was eclipsed by a surge of pure, primal instinct. She was a nurse. Her job was to protect. She lunged for the medical tray, her hand closing around a pair of surgical scissors. With a scream that was torn from her soul, she charged forward and plunged the steel blades into the amorphous mass. There was no resistance. The scissors passed through the creature as if it were smoke, meeting no flesh, no bone. But the thing reacted. The darkness recoiled, not in pain, but in interest. It detached from Emma's body and turned its attention to Lena, the struggle. It lay still, its eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Lena's fear was eclipsed by a surge of pure, primal instinct. She was a nurse. Her job was to protect. She lunged for the medical tray, her hand closing around a pair of surgical scissors. With a scream that was torn from her soul, she charged forward and plunged the steel blades into the amorphous mass. There was no resistance. The scissors passed through the creature as if it were smoke, meeting no flesh, no bone. But the thing reacted. The darkness recoiled, not in pain, but in interest. It detached from Emma's body and turned its attention to Lena. It moved faster than she could comprehend, a wave of living shadow that flowed across the floor and up her body. It was colder than anything she had ever felt, a void that leached the warmth from her skin, her blood, her very being. She felt it pour into her mouth, her nose, a suffocating tide of absolute black. She fought, she thrashed, but it was like fighting the ocean itself. It filled her, invaded her, and then it settled. The struggle was over. Lena stood perfectly still in the center of the room, the scissors falling from her numb fingers and clattering to the floor. The world outside her was silent, but inside, it was deafening. She could feel it. A second presence, coiled in the hollow of her chest. A second set of lungs, drawing breath in perfect, horrifying synchrony with her own. An inescapable bond had been forged. She was no longer alone inside her own body. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in soft shades of gray and rose, spilling through the windows of St. Jude's Memorial. The morning shift arrived, their cheerful chatter echoing in the halls, chasing away the last of the night's ghosts. When they reached room 3B, they found it empty. The bed was made, the sheets pulled taut with military precision. There was no sign of a struggle, no sign of a patient. Emma Thorne's body, which was supposed to be in the morgue, was simply gone. A search of the room revealed nothing, until a junior nurse, checking for a dropped chart, knelt and peered into the darkness beneath the bed. And there she was, Lena, curled into a tight ball, her arms wrapped around her knees. She appeared to be sleeping, her breathing slow and even. But it was the expression on her face that made the young nurse scramble backward with a silent scream. It was an expression of perfect, serene contentment. On Lena's lips, there was a small, knowing, and utterly terrifying smile. The disquiet of the new day had just begun.